The malicious old master. A malicious old master, enfeebled by age, and no longer able to fight an honorable duel, determined to maintain his fearsome reputation with cunning. Betaking himself to a cave in a wood not far from his town, he lay down inside and feigned to be sick. Whenever any of the other masters entered to inquire about his health, he sprang upon them and beat them senseless. Many stout warriors lost their lives in that way, until one day an astute young master called upon the old master in the cave. Having some suspicion of the truth, the young master addressed his elder from just beyond the entrance, asking how he did. The old master replied that he was indeed in a very bad way. "But," he said, "why do you stand outside in the cold? Pray, come in where it is warm and converse with me." "I should have done so," answered the astute young master, "if I had not noticed that all the footprints point towards the cave, yet none exit the other way." The Master and the Bear. Two masters were traveling on a country road together when a bear suddenly emerged from the woods. The first master immediately made for a tree at the side of the road, climbed up high into the branches, and hid himself there. The second master was not as nimble as his companion. Knowing he could not escape the approaching creature, he threw himself onto the ground and pretended to be deceased. The bear came up and sniffed all around him, yet the master kept perfectly still, all the while holding his breath, for he knew that no bear would molest a dead body. Sure enough, the bear took him for a corpse, chuffed, and then wandered away. When the coast was clear, the first master climbed down from the tree and asked the other what it was the bear had whispered to him when he put its mouth to his ear. The second master replied, "He told me never again to travel with someone who deserts a companion at the first sign of danger." With that, the second master took his leave from his companion, for he had learned the lesson that misfortune often tests the sincerity of friendship. Two Masters and a Tyrant. Two masters were traveling together. One had taken a vow never to speak the truth, whereas the other had sworn to never tell a lie. In the course of their travels, they came upon the realm of a narcissistic tyrant who fancied himself king. The tyrant, upon hearing of their arrival, ordered the masters to be brought before him. By way of impressing his guests with his magnificence, the tyrant received them whilst seated upon a gold-wrought throne, with the severed heads of his enemies impaled on spikes to either side. His subjects, dressed in all their finery, rang in long rows before the throne and its grisly bounty. When the master came into his presence, the tyrant asked them what they thought of him as a king. The lying master said, "Sire, anyone who knows your eminence must see that you are a most noble and mighty monarch." "And what do you think of my subjects?" continued the despot. "They," spoke the master, "are in every way worthy of their royal sovereign." The tyrant was so delighted with his answers that he gave the master a very handsome reward. The other master thought if his companion was rewarded so splendidly for telling a lie, he himself would certainly receive a far better remuneration for for telling the truth. When the tyrant turned to him and asked, "And what, good sir, is your opinion?" the truthful master replied, "I believe that you're a pompous tyrant, and all your subjects are insignificant cowards, most deserving of your rule." To his chagrin, the unfortunate man discovered that speaking truth to power seldom carries the expected reward, for the tyrant was so enraged by this reply that he ordered the honest master to be taken away and put to death. A master without a braid. A young master's sole conceit was his long, luxurious hair, which he took to combing and braiding daily before the mirror. After a time, he discovered that if he wove small blades into his braid, he could use it as a fearsome weapon, which to set upon his foes. Acquiring no small reputation over the years for doing so, ambushed by brigades one day, he fought his way free only to find that his braid had been cleaved in twain upon an adversary's blade. He was then so much ashamed of his appearance that he thought life not worth living unless he could persuade the other masters to part with their braids as well, and thus divert attention from his own loss. By and by, he called a meeting of his fellow masters and advised them to cut off their braids. "They are ugly things anyhow," he proclaimed, "and besides, they are heavy when soaked by sky, stream, or sea. Can we all not agree that it is tiresome to be carrying them about?" But his plan was thwarted when one of the other masters replied, "My friend, if you had not lost your own braid, you would not be so keen in getting us to cut off ours as well." The Disciple and the Fox. A disciple was greatly vexed by a sly fox, which came prowling nightly about his master's yard, and carried off their prize fowl. So he set a trap for the scavenging beast, and caught him up in it. While it would have been easy to slay the thief in his net at once, the disciple had other things in mind. In order to be revenged upon the fox, he tied a bunch of tow to its tail and set it on fire, and let the hapless animal go. As ill luck would have it, however, the terrified fox made straight under the nearby residence. Ignited by flames from the fox's tail, the building quickly caught fire, while those inside, smelling smoke and seeing flames, fled for their very lives. The disciple hung his head in shame, as his master's home was burnt into ash before his very eyes. Belatedly remembering his master's admonishment that those who set to embark upon revenge had best dig 2 graves. The Disciple and the Grapes. A certain master's disciple, having trained hard all day, was famished. Traveling home, he spied some fine bunches of grapes hanging from a vine that was trained along a high trellis, and hoped to slake his hunger by eating them. For an hour he did his best to reach them by jumping as high as he could into the air. Over and over again he leapt, but it was all in vain, for they were just out of reach. At last, exhausted, he gave up trying. Walking away with an air of dignity and unconcern, he remarked, "I thought those grapes were ripe, but I see now that they're quite sour and unfit for eating. Men such as this often disdain which they cannot possess. The Old Man and the Dishonest Doctor. A master, in his dotage, became almost totally blind from a disease of the eyes. After consulting a doctor, he made an agreement in the presence of witnesses that he should pay the doctor a handsome fee if he was cured of his condition, while if the doctor failed, he would receive nothing for his efforts. The doctor accordingly prescribed and carried out a course of treatment. Every time he paid a visit, however, the doctor took away with him some article from the master's house, until at last, when he stopped by for the last time and the cure was complete, there was nothing left inside. When the old master discovered that his house had been robbed of all his worldly possessions, he naturally refused to pay the doctor his fee. After repeated refusals on the master's part, the doctor brought a claim before the magistrates for payment of the debt which he claimed he was justly owed. On being brought into court, however, the wily old master was ready with the defense. The claimant, he said, has accurately stated the facts of our agreement. I undertook to pay him a fee if he cured me, and he, on his part, promised to charge me nothing if he failed. Now he says unto you that I am cured, but I assess that I am blinder than ever, and can prove the truth of my words. When my eyes were failing, I could at any rate see well enough to be aware that my house contained a certain amount of furniture and other things of value. But now, when according to the doctor I am cured, I am entirely unable to see anything inside my own home at all. The mischievous disciple. There was once a mischievous disciple who used to taunt people and strike out at those around him without any provocation, and thus became a great nuisance to everyone who called upon his master's home. Fed up with these antics, his master fashioned a bell, secured it with a silken cord, and bade the mischievous disciple wear it around his neck to warn other people of his presence. Unaware of the true reason the gift had been bestowed upon him, the disciple was very proud of the bell, and strutted about tinkling it with immense satisfaction, much to the annoyance of his peers. Finally, one day, an older student came up to him and said, "The fewer airs you give yourself, the better, young man. You are not so foolish to believe, are you, that the bell was awarded in recognition of merit? On the contrary, it's a badge of disgrace." To his great shame, the mischievous disciple discovered that notoriety is often mistaken for fame. The Master and the Pilfering Groom. There was once a groom who spent long hours clipping and combing the horse of which he had been given charge, but who daily stole a portion of his allowance of feed and sold it for his own gain. Malnutritioned, the horse gradually took to worse and worse condition. A traveling master came across the stable looking for a new mount to purchase. After examining the steed that was presented before him, he told the groom, "If you truly desire that beast to look sleek and well-groomed, you must comb him less and feed him more." The Bloodthirsty Brigand and the Disciple. A murderous brigand came upon a very young disciple toiling in his master's field, and had some small twinge of conscience given the age of his intended victim. So he cast about for a grievance for which to justify his bloodlust. "Last week at the tavern you insulted me most abhorrently," spoke the brigand. "That's impossible, sir," replied the youth, "for I am far too young to leave my master's residence. I work in the fields in hopes of some day demonstrating my merit, such that he will countenance that I may learn the mysteries of his system." "Well," reported the brigand, "you have stolen food from my hearth." "Well, that cannot be," replied the disciple, "for I have tasted naught but from my master's table, according to my needs." "You drink from my spring, then," continued the brigand. "Indeed, sir," said the youth, "I have never drunk anything but from my master's well." "All this matters not," retorted the brigand. "I shall not depart without unleashing my vengeance." Without further ado, he sprang upon the hapless child, running him through with his sword. The Master and the Innkeeper's Son. A certain master, exhausted from his travels, was sound asleep in his room when he was awakened by the innkeeper's son tiptoeing through the chamber. Losing his temper, the master seized the youth by the throat and prepared to strike him down with his fist. The boy piteously entreated the master to spare his life. "I did not mean to awaken you, noble sir," he cried. "Please let me go, and one day I will repay you for your kindness." The idea of so insignificant a creature ever being able to do anything for him amused the master, so much that he laughed out loud, released the boy, and went back to sleep. Soon enough, the boy's chance arrived. One day the master became entangled in a net, captured by vicious brigands who planned to dispose of him with great ceremony and torment come the dawn. The boy, who was out in the woods collecting firewood for the inn, recognized the master's cries of anger and distress, and quickly ran to the spot where the master was held. The boy waited in the nearby bushes until the brigands fell into a drunken stupor, then, under the cover of darkness, set at the ropes with his belt knife. Before long, the master was free. "There," whispered the boy, "you laughed at me when I promised that I would repay you, but now you see that I've kept my word. Even an innkeeper's son can help a great martial arts master." The Cut-Purse, the Thief, and the Master. A cut-purse and a thief went into partnership and sailed out to make their fortunes together. Before long, a master became aware of their nefarious activities and took it upon himself to put an end to their exploits. The knowledge that the master would soon catch up with them left them both dreadfully frightened and pondering whatever they should do. The thief, thinking that he had divined a method of saving his skin, took matters into his own hands. Leaving the cut-purse behind, he sought out the master and boldly said unto him, "I shall manage that you get a hold of the cut-purse without the trouble of stalking him, if you will promise to let me go free in exchange for my assistance." The master reluctantly agreed to this, and the thief then rejoined his companion, contriving before long to lead him by a hidden pit in the forest, which some hunter had dug as a trap for wild animals. A well-timed shove, and down into the depths the cut-purse fell. When the master, who had been following stealthily behind the pair, saw that the cut-purse was safely caught and could not soon escape the pit, it was to the thief that he turned his attention. Drawing his sword, he swiftly ran the criminal through with his blade. As the final breath departed his lips, the thief murmured, "I sought to betray a friend, yet it seems that I have only ruined myself." Unabashed, the master then proceeded to finish off the cut-purse. The Burglar and the Master. A certain burglar heard that students in a rich and well-heeled monastery were ailing. So he went to the marketplace, got himself up as a doctor, and taking with him a newly purchased set of instruments proper to his apparent profession, presented himself at the door. There he inquired after the health of those inside. "We shall do very well," the master replied without letting him in, "when we have seen the last of you." The burglar, discovering to his chagrin that no matter a villain may disguise himself, he will not deceive the wise, trod home poorer than whence he had left. Two masters at the arena. Two champions, masters of different styles, were companions on a journey. One was a grappler who specialized in strangulations, while the other relied on his fist to rain blows down upon his adversaries. In the course of conversation, they began to boast about their prowess and those worthies who they had defeated in battle, each claiming the superiority of their discipline over that of the other man. They were still arguing with much heat and vigor when they came upon an arena and beheld a statue out front of the stadium that depicted one warrior strangling another. "There," proclaimed the first master triumphantly, "look at that. His wrestling technique is much the same as mine. Does this not then prove to you that my style is greater than yours?" "Not so fast, my friend," replied the second master. "That is only your view. If statues could be made to move about on their own, you would see one man pummeling the other with lightning blows. Since they were fixed in place, the artist simply chose the method that could be depicted most pleasingly. Truly, there are two sides to every question, and this image sheds no more light upon yours than it does mine." The Woodsman and the Master. A woodsman who could not swim was felling a tree alongside the bank of a mighty river, when his axe, glancing off the trunk, flew out of his hands and fell into the water. As he stood by the river's edge, lamenting his loss, a wandering master happened along and asked him the reason for his grief. On learning what had happened, out of pity for the woodsman's distress, the master dived into the river, and bringing up a golden axe, asked him if that was the one that he had lost. The woodsman replied that it was not. So the master then dived in for a second time, bringing up a silver axe. He asked if it belonged to the woodsman. "No, that is indeed a handsome axe, but it is soft and malleable, hence could not fell a tree. I'm afraid that's not mine either." One more time, the master dove into the river, and this time brought up the woodsman's missing axe. The man was overjoyed at recovering his property and thanked his benefactor warmly. The latter was so pleased with the woodsman's honesty that he made him a present of the two other axes before continuing on his travels. When the woodsman related this story to his companions, one of them was filled with envy at his good fortune and determined to try his luck for himself. So he went and began to fell a tree at the edge of the river, and presently contrived to let his axe drop into the water, hoping that the master would arrive. Indeed, the master appeared as before, and on learning that the second woodsman's axe had fallen into the water, he dived in and brought up a golden axe, even as he had done on the previous occasion. Without waiting to be asked whether or not it was his own, the greedy fellow cried, "That's mine, that's mine," and eagerly stretched out his hand for the prize. But the master was so disgusted at the woodsman's dishonesty that he not only declined to give him the golden axe, but also refused to recover for him the one that had let fall into the stream. Turning to leave, the master shoved the woodsman into the water before continuing on his journey. Soaking wet, humiliated, and lacking the vital tool for which to conduct his trade, the woodsman discovered that honesty is indeed the best policy. The Master and the Water Pitcher. The master toiled day and night to perfect his body, straining so hard that he was no longer able to lift his arms, for so greatly he had labored. He had left a pitcher with some water in it nearby to slake his thirst, but had already drank from it the previous day and discovered there was so little left that, try as he might, he could not reach the liquid inside with his mouth or tongue. Unable to lift his arms despite a brief respite, it seemed as though he would perish from thirst within sight of the remedy. At last, the parched master hit upon a clever plan. He began scooping up nearby pebbles with his mouth and spitting them into the pitcher. With each pebble, the water rose a little higher, until at last it reached the brim, and thankfully, the knowing master was able to quench his thirst. Necessity, he had discovered, was the mother of invention.